Hey, I'm George Cranton, and over the last weekend, I made a game within 3 hours. I really wanted to test myself, so I joined this game jam called the Try Jam, where you only have 3 hours to develop the game. The theme for this jam was unachievable, which at first it took a while for me to come up with a very good idea, as I just couldn't think of something that I could make within 3 hours that could be unachievable, as I didn't want to go into an in-depth story, as I was worried I was going to run out of time. And then in games you always have to make something achievable, as that's the whole idea of a game. So the only thing I could think of really was just an endless tsunami of kind of like enemies coming your way and you just have to avoid them. So I ended up settling on that idea and going with it. So I started off by creating the art, as that's what I really wanted to improve on, and it ended up taking around about an hour and a quarter, but I'm really happy with what I did, and you'll see later on that it really did pay off. I managed to create a player, enemy, and a few menu sprites, as another thing that I really want to specifically improve on was my typography skills. Once all that was done, I managed to bring it over to Unity, and I started creating the actual game, which is what I love, as coding is my favourite thing to do. I started off by making the cursor invisible and making the player lock to the cursor, so you could use your mouse to move the player around and out of the way of enemies. This didn't really take too long to do, so I managed to quickly move on to creating the enemies, and what I did to do that was I created a spawner system to the right of the screen, which would spawn these what I call enemy layers, which basically were different patterns of enemies. It would spawn them in and they would move over to the left of the screen and you'd have to move out of the way of them. This didn't really take me too long, but because it was a 3-hour game jam, too long is a long time, so it ended up taking me a fair amount of time, so I only really had 1 hour left. So after this, bearing that in mind, I had to quickly create a menu and a system where you could die. So what I did was I made it so when you interacted with an enemy, you would die. But it would wait on the game for a minute before sending you to the menu, so then you could notice that you did die. Once I had done that, I made the background be this kind of red with these orange and yellowy kind of lighting effects, so that it would look a bit more interesting than just being a boring static red background. I then really quickly just put together this menu and play button, which I'm really happy with, because when you hover over the play button, this kind of blood-like texture appears, which matches it with the kind of overall theme of my specific game of hatred, as that's what the name is. I was originally planning on putting in this kind of very small story where when you started it would be you need to escape your hatred, and you'd have to you'd be this angry player and you'd be avoiding all these happy people, because I don't really know, to be honest. That's just what came to my mind. But then the whole idea was that you wouldn't be able to escape it, and when you die it would be you can never escape your hatred. But I'd run out of time to add this into the game, and I still haven't added it into the game. So it's called Hatred, but there's not really a reason why it's called Hatred. I mean, it kind of says it in the description, but once the game was done and my 3 hours was up, I quickly built it and then just uploaded it to itch.io, both a web version and a downloadable version. It ended up actually coming first place in the game jam for art, which I was really happy with, as that's what I really wanted to focus on. It didn't do too well overall or in the gameplay department, because I kind of ran out of time with that, so I didn't manage to make a score counter or anything else apart from just avoid these enemies, and it wasn't really too hard. So after letting some of my friends play it, they said that they really wanted it to be a bit harder and also to add a score counter, as if you went too far up you could just avoid these enemies. So I decided to make the enemies spawn much faster, and I added this other spawner which would spawn on your Y coordinate every second, so it would mean that you would never be able to simply stay in one place and not get hit by an enemy. I then added a point system where basically every second you'd gain an extra point, and then because the screen would stay in the game for like a couple seconds after you died before returning to the main menu, that also actually made it so it was much easier to read how many points you've got, but I didn't actually manage to make any save data or anything. So I uploaded that version to itch.io, but I've made sure to mention that that was not the Game Jam version. That was not the original 3-hour version. That one was probably made in about under 4 hours in total. If you want to play my game, you can go onto itch.io. I'll leave a link in the description below, where you can go on and you can play the game. The one on the web browser is the original one, as I really wanted to create a game in 3 hours, so I decided to leave that 3-hour one up. But if you do want to play the other one with the point system and all that stuff, you can download it if you just scroll down from the web page. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you will stay tuned for more videos. See ya.